everyone. Welcome to the Milan Sharma Show. I'm your host, Milan, and today my guest is Carter Heerema. He is a former Eastern student who ran track and cross country with me for a couple of years, and he was a captain of the team also. And he is right now at grad school at Rutgers University, pursuing a master's degree, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah. So Carter, welcome to the show. I'm glad you could
Thank you,
make
Milan. Welcome. So thank you for having me. I'm saying welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, of course. So, just to start off light on some things, what's something like could you say you've done over quarantine when everything first started? Because that's the last time I really saw you in person. Like everything just got shut down so quick. So, anything unique
Yeah.
you've done with your time, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Because it's weird to think about how like we just had to transition so quickly. So things that I've done with my time. So it's almost been a year now. So when we went virtual, and kind of got shut down last March, that was like it was like a big shakeout for everybody. I know, but especially for people in college like you and I, it was tough because we had to leave at like a moment's notice, which was really, really hard. So I know myself, and like a lot of college students, I'm sure took that transition very difficult. So my time initially was spent. I went back home to my parents' house, and kind of just hunkered down for a little while. And it was very difficult because I needed to come up with different things to occupy that time. So a couple things that I found that I was able to help myself was my passion for running. I was in the middle of a really good season when everything got shut down, so I kind of kept my fitness up. I took a few days off here and there, but I tried to keep getting outside and getting fresh air by running every day, doing like workouts, like body weight workouts and stuff like that. Different kind of like CrossFit workouts. I was getting like workouts from like different friends of mine, just to do because I was bored and needed something to do. So yeah, that was kind of like how I spent my time. And then just doing a lot of like stuff to help myself and my mental health during that time as well, because it was definitely like a really hard time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I can definitely agree that running definitely helps for sure. Like I couldn't imagine not doing any, like if I was a swimmer, like not being having access to a pool and just like completely stopping moving.
Yeah. Oh, that would be 10 times worse if you didn't
Right.
have access to a pool or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So that was been really tough. But I remember this is kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I remember you said there was this one show that you watched. It was like this tiger show or something. I
Oh
didn't.
my gosh.
I had to
Tiger
ask, like,
King.
did you like it or dislike it? Because I feel like there's a lot of like mixed things, a lot of mixed things about it.
It's funny. I was literally just talking about this last night with my fiance and her family, because Tiger King feels like it was so long ago, but it really wasn't. It was only a year ago. But Tiger King, during the initial phases of kind of like quarantine, because New Jersey, and I'm sure Pennsylvania as well, kind of had like a mandatory kind of lockdown quarantine period in the beginning. That was like one of the things that got me through, because I wasn't going out of the house. I wasn't seeing really any friends or family for like a couple weeks, just so we could kind of figure out what was going on. Nobody really knew anything about COVID and how dangerous it was or wasn't, how like what populations it was affecting and whatnot. So every single night, my family and I would sit down and watch an episode of Tiger King, which is great quality television. It's not, but it's kind of like a reality TV show about this guy, um, who like had this tiger, like I wouldn't even call it like a reserve. It was like a glorified zoo, except it was like a personal experience. Like people could go and like get really, really close to tigers or like hold tigers. Um, and other exotic animals, and you paid all this money to have like this up close and personal experience with them. Um, and it was crazy. Yeah, the guy's name was Joe Exotic. But yeah, so it was this crazy show, and like unbelievable things happen along the way. You like learn about like like people who have exotic cats are just weird people, I would say. Like very interesting people, and there was like a lot of drama. Somehow it turns into a murder mystery, and like you learn about like the Joe Exotic's conviction, how he gets sent to jail, all of this craziness that happens. So it's total like drama fest reality TV show, but it helped me get through. So it was good.
Yeah, sometimes odd shows like that. I mean, in odd times, it matches up well. You know?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Like there's something to having something that distracts you from the reality that you're in, right? So I'm not a reality TV guy. I don't endorse any reality TV shows, but at the time that show was needed because it helped me kind of get away from what was going on in the real world at that moment. And I think that's why America loved it so much. It was because things were so crazy and people needed to be distracted, and it was just very, very distracting. So
Right.
it was.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. I appreciate that explanation. Yeah.
So Milan, if you ever get a chance, highly recommend Tiger King.
All right.
It's
Yeah.
good
I
stuff.
have to look at that at some point. Yeah. So yeah. So we're going to transition a little bit. It's basically so obviously you were a social work undergraduate student a couple years ago.
Yep.
So I'm just curious because first of all, like I didn't really hear about social work that often. I always
Hmm.
think psychology when I think of that sort of field. So
Yep.
when I think of like first of all, how would you define like social work from your like experience? How would you really like define that like something that's not psychology, if that makes sense?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Milan, that's a fantastic question. So you're right. When we think about counseling, when we think about mental health professionals, we think about people who do counseling and people who do therapy, and we think about a lot about psychology majors, counseling majors. And you're absolutely right that social work doesn't always immediately come to mind. The difference I would say between, and this is my personal opinion on what the difference is. Other people, might differ. I think the difference is between social work in psychology is essentially social work has kind of like a more general, I would say, kind of like approach. Like for instance, like social workers do a lot of different jobs. You can find social workers in schools. You can find social workers in nursing homes. You can find social workers in government and writing policies. You can find social workers working in communities, and you can find social workers doing, your quote unquote like counseling or traditional therapy, if you will. So there is a lot of different avenues that social workers can kind of work in. Excuse me. And so that's kind of how I would make a difference between the two. Psychology is more of the traditional therapy, counseling, mental health as most people think of it. Social work is a little bit more broad and encompasses a number of different things, which is ultimately why I decided to become a social work major. I was very When I was deciding what I wanted to do in college, my dream goal was to work as a school counselor, because I was, very inspired by, my school guidance counselor. He was somebody that spoke into me a lot. Um, and so I wanted to kind of do what he did and help people the way he helped people. And when I was talking to my mom, who is a social worker, she, is biased and told me, to think about pursuing social work because let's say I didn't want to do counseling or didn't want to do school counseling later on in the road, I could branch off and do a number of different things. So yeah, that's kind of the reason for that.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because I remember you and your friend Ben, I believe.
Yes, Ben Reichner, my roommate.
Yes. Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember you were saying that you two the only guys in your class that were social work, or at least there was a few guys, right? It was definitely
Only yes, we were paired together as roommates our freshman year, which is a great story, by the way. But that we don't need to share that on the podcast necessarily. But we were the only reason that we were paired as roommates. Shout out to Eastern University for doing this, is because we were the only two guys who declared social work, that declared as a social work major as freshmen. Now there were more guys that joined us. Shout out like El Fatih Chase, who joined us later. And then we had more guy social workers in cohorts above us. Yeah, there was some above us, and then some in classes below us. But when Ben and I joined, when Ben and I were freshmen, we were the first two to declare, and so they put us together, and that's why we were roommates. Ben is also a great example of a social worker who is doing other things. For instance, Ben right now is in law school. So he got his social work undergrad, and he wanted to help, vulnerable populations in the field of law. So he got his social work undergrad, and now he's pursuing his law degree. And he has, he's an inspiration in somebody, an example of a person, who's using social work in a non-traditional avenue. So yeah, he's a good example.
yeah, definitely. I remember. I think I remember vaguely when he got accepted somewhere. And I was almost kind of surprised. I was like, "Wow, he's going for law." I didn't expect that almost, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, great for him though.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because I always wondered. Even psychology is kind of similar with much more women in the field. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
something. I saw some statistic like over like 70% of a lot of psychology majors were like women. This is
Interesting.
psychology, but
Yeah.
social work is pretty. I'm sure it's pretty comparable. So I was curious, like how did you guys did you and Ben or just you yourself? Like, what were your thoughts as like a freshman? Like, was it a little bit like a little like I guess overwhelming or like a little bit nerve wracking that you guys the only that you were two were the only men, or was it just like business as usual in the classroom?
So there's definitely a different dynamic, right? So that's a really good point that you bring up. Social work, psychology, mental health profession based fields are across the board, as you said, like women dominated. There's a lot more women in those fields than men. I don't know the exact statistics, so I can't say whether that 70% is right or wrong. Um, I think I think it's probably pretty accurate based on what I've seen. Um, but it's very interesting. So the classroom itself has a different dynamic. The professors that Ben and I had were all female professors, um, which is interesting. And I think it's great because it provides in college a lot of the professors are traditionally male, I would say. So it's interesting to kind of have this diversity of opinion, and especially be in classes that are very female dominated. It's definitely a little different at times, but it's an adjustment. Personally, myself, I am pretty comfortable. I can kind of adapt to an environment. But that's one of the reasons why I think Ben and I bonded so much, is because you know we were the two guys in the program, and in many ways we kind of stuck together because we kind of had a shared experience, um, and I think that was really cool. But yeah, I think there's a reason why. I think if I could theorize why that is, why there are more women than men in social work, it's because I think largely our culture tells us that women are supposed to be more empathetic, um, women are supposed to be more caring, and are supposed to be more in tune with their emotions. And I think that those are all great things, but I think something that our culture doesn't. Our culture tells the opposite to men. It says that men should, not be in touch with their emotions. They should not care about their.
Carter, can you hear me? Sorry, I think you just froze for a second.
Oh, I froze. I'm so sorry.
I just heard like the last thing I heard you say was like our culture would say that men are like men shouldn't be in touch with their emotions
Yeah.
and that, and then you're going into something else. I just kind of like froze for a second. So
Yeah. No worries. No worries.
Hmm.
So basically, to pick up where I left off, I was just saying that like, our culture kind of says that men, shouldn't be more emotions or feeling based, and that's why it's important to have male social workers to kind of to speak to younger or older generations of men specifically, and show them that it's okay to you know to be in touch with their emotions, and also to be a voice to like people who have fallen into that kind of stereotype, and to show that it's okay to kind of go a different way.
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, I definitely agree that it's important, especially if men, need to seek counsel. And like you said, your guidance. I don't know if it was a guy or man or woman, but you said your guidance counselor was very impactful in your life.
My guidance counselor was a man, and I think that's why maybe I was able to connect with him so much. He was somebody that was able to kind of break those stereotypes for me, which was good.
Yeah, I definitely think it's more like, I guess, at a younger age, more natural, like more relatable to relate to the same, man to man, woman to woman kind of scenario. So I definitely agree with that. And I think that's one thing where I think I think we would also, as guys, like, at least for me, I'd like to express my emotions in like more of a private setting. And I think that's something that should be more, I guess, acceptable in a way, because at least from what I've seen, a lot of people would say, "Oh, I don't want to like be crying in front of all these people and things like that." But it's definitely, and I think you would agree with me here, but you can say what you want.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely much more broad and different than that, because it's more so addressing what's going on with the situation. Because if you don't address it, it's just always a hindrance to you all the time.
No, absolutely. Like I think you make a great point. Like a lot of times I think there's a reason why men have a higher rate of suicide in our country than women, and it's because men don't oftentimes aren't taught how to properly seek help when they have something going on. Men oftentimes deal with their emotions internally, and they don't really express how they're feeling. So I'm not saying that, like obviously you're not saying that you personally wouldn't feel like comfortable crying in front of this big group of people. And I'm not saying, you have to, like in order to get in touch with your emotions, you have to bawl your eyes out in front of like, your entire class. Like not like, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that either necessarily. But I'm saying that like, it's important to make sure that we take care of ourselves and our mental health, as men, because, we're not taught to do that as much.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I also think at least for me, I think it's definitely more of a comforting thing to see, like, if a man's like, I just look at it. It's not more like a guy like crying, like not even crying, just like more so explaining what's going on internally. But I think it's more so it's just a professional, like seeking help by a professional, really, in just a
Yeah.
different way than you're used to. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my opinion on that. But yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate that explanation for
No,
sure.
absolutely.
So I guess going along with that, I've heard this. This is kind of a philosophical thing.
Mm-hmm.
Something like, I'm sure you've heard like Stoicism before.
No, explain it to me actually.
Okay, I'm glad. Okay, I wrote the definition down just in case. So
Yeah, no, absolutely.
basically, so Stoicism is basically like, it's the endurance of pain or hardship without the display of feelings and without complaint.
Okay.
That's basically what that is. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, like, I guess back in history, people would say like, strong men would, let's say they're enduring hardship, like maybe they go to war, maybe they do all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they wouldn't outwardly
Express.
just display like pain or like sadness, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say this sort of trait in the modern days a virtue, kind of like virtuous for men to adapt to in like a positive way? Like, can that be used in a positive way in today's light? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on that.
That's a great question. So I think I think that there can be a place for it, but I think that the way we think about it needs to change. For instance, uh, you talk about how like like men would go off to war and endure these like traditionally endure like hardships and stuff, and then have to be strong and just kind of handle it. And I think that that attitude is welcoming mental health issues of substance abuse and use, and in some instances, like it promotes anger and violence, towards others. You see examples of men who, in modern society, who like veterans, who will be, like abusive physically or emotionally towards family members once they come back because they're dealing with traumas, and they don't know how to express them. So I think that while it is important, like for I do see virtue in handling hardship and handling difficult times with grace, right? And being strong and enduring pain and whatnot. But at the same time, I think it's also important to know that you can do that while also leaning on the support of others and doing that in an appropriate way. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I think that you can be somebody who is strong, but also is dependent or interdependent and uses the support of others, or the support of professional help when they need to. And having a knowledge of when you need to, go and get help is also really important.
Yeah, I like your point there where you said being interdependent with people because it's funny. This is kind of a little off topic, but I think of my one time my grandfather like his back was just like hurting when like for a few days or a week. And I'm sure you've heard like stories where your family members may put off certain things like
Yeah.
doctor visits or something like that. And then my grandma's like, you should go see chiropractor. You should go see this person, professional. They'd be like, I'm good, I'm good. And then eventually he does, and he's much better. So I think it's definitely, and he's like a hard nosed, stubborn guy. So like I
Yes.
definitely can see like the importance of reaching out to people and being supportive in that way. And I guess I guess with like the wars, like that virtue, like going like war and things like that with the Stoicism, I'll just add my little like a little tangent in there where I kind of believe that stuff like sports is probably like the most healthy way of, or like like competitive things. It's probably the most healthy way of expressing that in a productive manner where you're exercising and things like that in a team in a collaborative way. So going along with that, I'm just curious, like what was your like motivating factor of doing track, especially in like in a college setting? Because a lot of people, I've noticed like in middle school, it seemed like the whole, at least in my school, it seemed like everybody was doing it in middle school. Like, oh, it was a fun thing to do.
Like the cool thing to do.
What's that?
It was like the popular thing to do.
Yeah, yeah. Like everyone like they hide in like the hill or something. Like it is and just like sneak off and do all this stuff. But then high school, less people did it, and then of course college, it's like a lot less people do it. So I'm curious, like what really motivated you to say like I'm going to make this commitment along with being a social work major?
Yeah, so running for me has always been a part of my life. My dad would tell me when we were growing up, I would always want to race him places. Like if we were walking down the street, going for a walk or even like going from point A to point B, I'd always be like, Dad, let's race. Like let's race here, let's race there. Like always running. And so running has always been a huge part of my life. And even before I found out, I would like to say that I had a good running career in college. I didn't necessarily get to achieve everything that I wanted to. Obviously, my last season got cut short. But with that, I definitely would consider, my career to be a success. And, I just think that for me, it helped me a lot with my mental health. It helped me a lot, with my academics, believe it or not, having to stay organized between balancing running and schoolwork and internship and everything that comes with college helped me a lot. And that passion for running just kind of continued, when I was in college, and it grew because I was around people who are passionate about running. And so, I saw it as a way that I could help, like you said, use it as an outlet to both help myself, and as a way that I could, compete at a high level. And I'm a competitive person, so, I'll compete with anything. So, it was a way to get out competitive energy, and just do something that I love doing. So yeah, that's a big reason why I continued doing track in college, despite everything that else I had going on.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with you that it's funny because I remember sometimes even during the 2 week off season we would have, like I'd still be doing homework sometimes late at night. I'm thinking to myself, how am I putting this off right now? I'm not running. I don't have any excuse.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd be so disorganized during those 2 week breaks. Um, and people often, and the funny thing is, people would tell me that I was a more, um, I'm not somebody that usually people describe as angry, but people would say that I was angry or snippy with people during my 2 weeks because I wasn't getting my workout in, and I was a little more disorganized. And it's funny, so that exercise is just so good for you, you know,
Hmm.
um, especially the heavy type of exercise that we were doing. A lot of good endorphins, um, and good just overall, chemicals, that are released when you work out at the level we were.
Hmm. Definitely, especially cross country season for sure. I
Yeah.
definitely felt it for, like the longer, long mile weeks.
Yeah, those post run highs are real. That's a real thing. So it's
Yeah,
good.
for sure. Definitely. Yeah. So, yeah, one thing I saw that was definitely unique. So I saw in your Instagram bio that you had this little transition to
Hmm.
like poetry.
Yep.
So before I get into like the details more so,
Hmm.
I, because I've never really, I don't see too often people doing poetry as a more of an outlet thing because I've always thought of it like, oh, it's like an assignment or this or that. So I'm
Hmm.
curious, what really got you into the poetry that you created or are creating,
Hmm.
and like the little music twist to it too. That was really fascinating to see too. So yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I got into poetry when I was in high school, and it's interesting. So in Milan, obviously but for those of you who don't know, I've always loved music, um, specifically hip hop and rap music. Milan and I always had a great time talking about rap music, and yeah. So like for me, poetry was it started as a way to have fun in high school. Like, I would like a group of friends would like mess around and like write raps or we would freestyle in the lunchroom or whatever, and just kind of like mess around, and we'd play beats and rap over them, or we'd like write poems and just kind of like just as a way to like mess around, which was just fun. It was just something that everybody did. But then, it was cool because those, just kind of like little like fun things that we would do kind of developed. And I started writing spoken word poetry, which kind of has this, it's very much poetry. It kind of has a little bit more of like a rhythm, sometimes more of like a rap-esque feel to it, I would
Mhm.
say. But yeah, so I started getting into that when I was in high school, just as a way to, as a way for me to process some of the things that I was going through, and also a way to express that and vocalize that to, to people. So, it actually, that poetry actually came out of a tough time that I was having in high school. And I needed to kind of express my feelings over like writing, in order to just kind of deal with some of the like emotions that I was having at that time. And then it grew from there. And then obviously, I was blessed in high school, I mean, in college to, help run like a spoken word poetry club at Eastern, which was called Audacity. So that was a lot of fun. Was able to join that group of people my freshman year, and they really helped me out, just, helping me process with, my emotions through writing, and also giving me a platform to share that and have people relate. So that was really cool.
Mm. Yeah, that is definitely interesting. I like that point where you mentioned writing as expressing your emotions, because I feel like that's something that I've always heard, like, because if I would do something like that, if someone heard of me doing it, they're like, "Oh, Millen, you have your own diary and stuff like that." And they're like teasing you. I'm like, "Oh no!" I'm like, I try to like hide it. I'm like, "Uh oh, I don't want people to see that." That's what I think about. But like, I definitely agree. It's like a healthy, at least for me, when I've done it,
Mhm.
I feel weights lifted off my shoulders sometimes.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
for sure.
um, it's a great way to express feelings that you have a tough time expressing when you're talking like we are right now. um, I would share poems with, at the time, my current fiance, but at the time my girlfriend, um, or with family members, and I would oftentimes get reactions like, I didn't know you felt that way about X, Y, and Z. Or
Mm,
like, I would share something and they would say, I didn't know that that was a story that you had. And I didn't know how to maybe tell people that story, just talking like this. But when I would write it in a poetic form, I could use it as a way to tell people what was on my heart. Um, and like you said, it's like lifting a weight off of your shoulders. Um, Also, in terms of the journal slash diary thing, totally, totally cool to keep a journal slash diary. I've been using like I will, for me, it's like a prayer journal, essentially. I write, like I write down, prayers, um, that I have, but I use it as like a way to write poetry, to pray, um, and to just talk about my day. And I try to do it like, I'd probably do it 3 or 4 times a week. And it's a great mental health practice.
yeah, it, it's hard. Let me think for a second. It's great to be consistent like that, like for
Hmm.
sure. Like being consistent, I think is kind of hard sometimes. So that's very good. And it's funny you said that about journaling. Like there's some journal stuff that is so funny. Like I've read through, like especially the one. So I was at I went on like a senior week trip, and I wrote some funny stories in there. And I remember at the time I was thinking to myself, like, I really didn't feel like writing all this, but I was writing it all down, and now I have it like just to read on like 3 years, 4 years later. I'm just like, wow, it's more funny than I thought.
Hmm.
Every single
And
time
it's
I read.
cool to reflect on something that you've written years ago, right? So I have this stack of journals in various places around my room. Um, and sometimes when I'm going through things and I clean them out, I open up and I'm like, wow, I can see exactly how I was thinking and feeling 5 years ago, like when I was in high school. I can see what I was dealing with. Like that test, I knew I was worried I was going to fail, or um, like the mental health struggles that I was going through at that time, or like just the everyday grind of being a high school student. Like it's kind of cool. Like it takes you back, and it's cool to appreciate how far you've come as well.
Yeah, you definitely took the words out of my mouth. I was thinking that too. Like, basically appreciating how far you come each time, because
Hmm.
sometimes you think, oh, like I feel like I can't go through this, and then that was like 2 years ago. You're like, wow, that
Yeah,
feels like
yeah.
almost. not as legitimate as you thought it would be. It's
Mm-hmm.
a hindrance in your life. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that. So basically, okay, so you basically explain what a spoken word poetry artist is, kind of like a little rhythm with like a, because it's very interesting. Oh, you continue. I want to hear what you say about it. Yeah.
No, no. I mean, so I like spoken word because it has no rules. Like that. I mean, there's a lot of poetry. Like for instance, haikus are all about syllables, right? Like you have to follow a certain syllable breakdown. Um, there are different poems. You can like even if you go back to Shakespeare, who did like the heartbeat, it was called like iambic pentameter or something like that. I don't even remember, but like it was kind of like the heartbeat type rhythm, like with the poems and the stories and whatnot. Like I love spoken word because it kind of was just like, we're going to get away from all the rules. You're not going to read it on a page. It's going to be spoken. You can put it over music. You can not put it over music. You can like, it was so much freedom, and it can rhyme. It doesn't have to rhyme, like all. So it was just so freeing because there was no rules. But it's funny how there's no rules, but there is kind of rules, so like, but that's what I liked about it. Like it could sound like rap or hip hop, or it could sound like, you know like a very traditional, like old style poem if you wanted it to. So there was a lot of room to kind of use creatively, and that's why I enjoyed it so much.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So one of them, I just wrote down a little bit from the song that you have. Well, not song. I saying song. I guess it's
It's all
kind of
good.
like some kind of music, right? A little
Yeah,
bit of music.
yeah,
So it's called. I'll link this below too when I publish
yeah.
this video. It's called One Size Fits All.
Yep.
It's linked to your Instagram,
Hmm.
and so one thing I found from there. I'm going to read this a little bit.
Hmm.
Let me see.
I wrote this a while ago. I got to see if I remember.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, you said one point you made, which I thought was very powerful, was you said when you see people through a certain lens, for example, in your poem, you
Hmm.
said that you state that people with disabilities are defined by their diagnosis. So, for
Hmm.
example, if they have autism, if they have certain um, things they're born with,
Hmm.
um, but those that are without such diagnoses are often defined by their personality, which I thought that was very interesting because
Hmm.
I thought it seems like people, if they're, let's say they're willing to meet somebody, they shake their hand like, oh, they have this, and they kind of like that kind of gets in front of their vision.
Hmm.
Seems
Yeah.
like past what they're really going through. So
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
it's curious, but what did you just come up with that? Just kind of like, you know what I mean? Like, how did that really come to happen? I'm just
Yeah.
curious.
So that poem that I wrote, I actually, well, that's actually I wrote it. It was an older poem that I'd writ like earlier in college, and then I redid it and put it with the music later on in my college career. And that was for Autism Awareness Month, which is in April. And I did that because that whole poem was kind of inspired by my brother Wyatt, who has autism. He's 13 now. He's an amazing kid. Um, and I also worked and still COVID kind of put a pause on my work there. But I worked for a while with an organization called the ARC, which helped adults with disabilities. I specifically worked with a lot of adults with autism or other intellectual disabilities there. And so that was kind of birthed out of that experience, my personal experience, and also my work experience. Um, and as a social worker, it was something that was very near to my heart, because you know it's interesting. Like I see, for instance, like we're having this conversation right now. Like it's easier for me to see you, Milan, as like a runner, a guy who has a heart and is very enthusiastic about having like these conversations with people of different backgrounds. Somebody who you know likes to stay active, somebody who is passionate about what they believe in, um, and as somebody that like lets to you've told me you love to dance and sing and have a good time. And so I see you as that Milan, right? But if I was to, for instance, look at my brother or somebody that had a disability, a lot of times you wouldn't see them for their interests or who they were, but you would see them as, oh, that person who has autism, that person who has Down syndrome, that person who has schizophrenia, even, like, and so what I wanted that poem to show was that those people are people too. They're more than their diagnosis. So my brother Wyatt, um, he's hysterical. He loves football, and he could tell you every single statistic about the New York Giants, from like their current team to like when the team was formed, like whenever that was. I don't even know. And he loves like Mario, and he would, he'll play Mario games with me for hours. And he loves, like Star Wars, and, can tell you all these fun and interesting facts about Star Wars. And so like, that's the way I see him because I live with him. But, to an outside perspective, you might see him as a kid that just has autism, so that was kind of the inspiration there, like to kind of show like that people should be seen as people first and not through their diagnosis.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think is definitely, he goes even beyond diagnosis like this level. Like and that's one thing that you could just go in a lot of different ways with this, because
yeah, absolutely.
If you go like, if you see someone with like clothes they're wearing or social media and they certain things they post, even it's funny, like I have one example where I see someone with social media, all these things, and so like in class, like I'm talking to this person and I'm like exploring their ideology more, and I realized like I made an assumption that's much more, I think, more maybe not extreme, but like much more like hard line in this direction rather than more middle of the line, which I would never have really known that if I didn't speak with this person. So I was like it's very, so just from that moment there, I mean, that's a little bit less of a, unfortunate circumstance, like aligning diagnoses with personalities. But I just thought of that. I was like, wow, that's very relatable for sure. Like that kind of.
Yeah, especially as you're right, in an age where social media is so big, we get snapshots of people's lives, right? You go on somebody's social media, you can see their political beliefs, their friend group, sometimes their religion, their occupation. You can see a whole lot about somebody, and you never even had a conversation with them. So you can make snapshot judgments about somebody very easily. And like you said, expanding, greater than disability, we can see all kinds of people or judge all kinds of people without even sitting down with them and having a conversation.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And I think, and I just said another quote here. You said, because it's funny that the title of your poem is like one size fits all, and I think that kind of fits with what you're saying with, because you kind of said maybe the way we view people is flawed. Say one size fits all. That was a great little rhyme there.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah. Let me see. Oh, this was really cool. So you said like we've given people so many labels that we can be organized and be put on shelves. And I think that's something too. Like I've definitely been guilty of doing sometimes, where you see something and you're like, oh, they're a jock, and this guy, if he's lifting in the gym, or like anything like that. When I have conversations with them and they're the most like philosophical, kind of nerdy guys I've met.
Yeah.
Like it's pretty unbelievable. So do you have anything else to add on to that? Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you've talked a lot about it, but just like you've said, just saying that people are greater than what you perceive them to be. There is, I'm trying to think. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but there's a certain theory that kind of talks about this. Saying that, and it was something in social work, but like I said, I'm drawing a blank on the name. But just in a roundabout way, like it's easy to make assumptions about people, and then like have those assumptions you find out be totally wrong. There's people in my life that I have met for the first time and very much disliked. And then as I've gotten to know them, spent time with them, I've then realized, oh, they do have very admirable characteristics. And there are like, you can find good in almost anybody, you know. And I would argue anybody, but you know, some people might not argue that. But I would argue that there's good in every single person, you know, because that's just, you know, I think that's like fundamentally, you know, part of how we're created. But you know, I think if you spend time with people, you know, you can find, you know, things that you didn't know about people before that will help you appreciate them and help you realize why people are the way they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, I don't know if it's Carl Jung, but there was somebody, definitely a famous psychologist back in the 1900s, where they kind of said, like every person, like this person believed that every person's like a good natured at heart. It's like some, which is kind of like definitely something that speaks to me, as I'm a psychology major. So it definitely speaks to me about, I'm sure you too. That's your opinion too. So, yeah. So, if people want to learn more about you, Carter, is anything you would like to share? Any sources, websites, anything you have at all, home, your YouTube or anything like that?
Yeah. If people want to learn more about me, you know, like you said, my social media pages are always great. They're not being updated at the moment because I'm taking a little break from social media, but you know, they're still up. And then, you know, even like sometimes people ask me a lot, like, oh, like, where can we, like, I've had people ask me like, oh, like, where can you find poetry or whatnot? Just, you know, searching my name into YouTube should pop up something. And yeah, but no, I don't think I have a website or anything like that. But yeah, just social media, YouTube, that kind of thing.
Okay, cool. And I think your fiance's name was on the one that I just watched on the latest
Yeah,
one.
she helped me, like, so my fiance also helps, she also writes poetry. We've done pieces together. She's helped me with like audio, visuals, that kind of thing. So we kind of collab as a team sometimes, and that's why, like, I think on the one that you're talking about, I think it's like our name kind of together. Like she started this kind of brand called Truly Spoken, which was like this cool way for us to like get like media and social, I mean, in a spoken word and stuff like that out on a platform. So that was cool. So yeah, that's kind of how we were, you know, getting out pieces of, you know, spoken word, and she had like some blog posts and stuff that she was working on, and that was kind of how we were doing it in college.
All right, great. Well, thank you,
Yeah,
Carter. Thank you for sharing that, and
of course.
thank you for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time. Just stay on though, because
Absolutely.
then I'll end the recording from here. So
Absolutely.
stay on. But yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for everyone for watching. I appreciate it.
Of course.